everybody hear me okay? All right. I'm Doug Marker, City Club President. If you wouldn't mind remembering to turn off your cell phones and other paging devices, we'd appreciate it. I have just a few announcements to make, as always. Our Friday Forum next Friday, November 4th, is Ending Homelessness in Portland. Our speakers will be Genevieve Nelson, co-founder of the Sisters of the Road Cafe, Lisa Schroeder, member of both of the Downtown Retail Council and the Mayor's Public Safety Action Committee, Portland City Commissioner Eric Sten, and the panel will be moderated by Gretchen Kafori. Today is October's final Friday. We invite you to join us for an open house at City Club Commons at 9th and Washington Southwest. It's from 4:30 to 6, and it's an opportunity to meet other club members and the City Club staff. I know many of you here still need to join City Club. Our membership committee has a sign-up table over there on the side, and today we are waiving our $25 membership initiation fee if you'll join us. And thank you to Susan Kelly and Tom Cox for staffing the membership table. Several weeks ago, I announced a special grant to the City Club from the Meyer Memorial Foundation. The grant funds a new staff position for membership and development. This position will help the City Club grow its membership, which is vital to improving Portland's culture of civic engagement. I'm pleased to announce that Margaret Eichman is joining us as our Membership and Development Director. She'll start next Tuesday. Margaret is past executive director at the Children's Museum and a program coordinator at the Regional Arts and Culture Council. She's been a City Club member herself since 1988 and was a past chair of our Arts and Culture Issue Committee. We're thrilled to have Margaret join us, and again, thank you, Meyer Foundation, right there, for your support of City Club. Our sponsors this quarter who make broadcasts of the City Club possible are McEwen Giswold LLP, and Medico Support Services of the Northwest Incorporated. Would you join me in thanking our sponsors? Thank you. To our program, Governor Ted Kulongoski returns to City Club today to address the importance of education funding to Oregon's economy. At least I hope that's what you're talking about. He also brought teleprompters. We appreciate the governor speaking here and to our speaking here to us today and to our radio and television audience. The 2005 legislature's debate on public education funding pretty much ended where it began. The governor began with a budget of $5 billion for K-12 education. Education advocates criticized that request as far below the amount needed to meet the state's achievement goals. Improving economic forecasts allowed the legislature to adopt a budget of above $5.3 billion. But the legislature and the governor could not resolve how to stabilize Oregon school funding. Both Governor Kulongoski and Speaker Karen Minnis proposed stabilizing funding formulas during the session, but neither were adopted. The 2005 legislature ended with a budget, but no long-term solution. Governor Kulongoski has tried to expand the discussion. He stresses thinking about public education as preschool all the way through college, about blending public education into job training, about expanding opportunities in rural Oregon as well as the I-5 corridor, about accountability for how Oregon spends its education dollars. So today's City Club Friday Forum is an important address to the state from our governor, and we're proud to have him here. Governor Ted Kulongoski.
Thank you, Doug, for your very generous introduction. I also want to thank the members of the City Club for giving me this opportunity before public discourse gets reduced to a few sound bites and snappy ads. And I want to talk about some issues that are important to all of us. T.S. Eliot famously wrote that time future is contained in time past. And I agree with that statement. Oregon's future is bright and getting brighter by the day. We are building that future on the solid foundation of fiscal honesty, responsibility, and stability we've put in place the last 3 years. If I may, I call this intelligence redesign. When I took office, state government in Oregon was in the midst of its worst revenue loss since the Great Depression, and very much in need of a newly designed plan for our economy. That's why I've said since the start of my administration that growing our economy and creating family wage jobs is my top priority. This often leads to an almost Greek chorus response of, "Governor, what about education? Governor, what about the environment? Governor, what about health care and human services?" I understand why those questions are asked. Nobody wants to expand health care coverage more than I do. Nobody wants to give our schools an adequate and reliable source of funding more than I do. And nobody wants to protect our environment from pollution and a reckless federal government more than I do. But here's my answer. Only a rapidly expanding economy will give us the resources we need to support the vital services every Oregonian is entitled to, especially education. When I say education, I don't just mean K through 12. I mean an education enterprise that begins with preschool and is a lifelong learning experience. I'll have more to say about my vision for the education enterprise shortly, but first, I want to go back to February 2003. At that time, I had been in office a little over a month and was invited to give my first major speech since being inaugurated. This is how I ended that speech. Most of what we are hearing these days is about what we cannot do. My message is different. My message is about what we will do. I'm absolutely convinced that Oregon's best days are still ahead of us. Now, some of you may remember these words because I delivered them to the City Club of Portland. My message hasn't changed. I am not here to tell you what we cannot do. I am here again to tell you what we will do. But before I do that, I want to tell you what is at the root of my governing philosophy, what's behind the policy choices I've made over the last 3 years and still motivate me today. My core belief is that if Oregonians have the economic ability to take care of themselves and their families, if they have a family wage job, access to health care, and enough money for a comfortable retirement, most of our problems will be relatively easy to resolve. Crime will go down, demands on our social safety net will go down, and all of the indicators of economic health will go up. This is why, as your governor, I see my job as growing Oregon's economy and creating more high-quality jobs for the citizens of this state. Yes, I'm the first to admit that figuring out how to more fairly slice the pie is a big responsibility of mine, especially during tough economic times. But my biggest responsibility is growing the pie, and that's what I've been focused on. How? First, by streamlining government. Businesses like to say that time is of the essence, and every day they wait for a permit is one less day they're investing in our future and hiring new workers. But it is not just the private sector. People have busy lives, and time is short for them too. So from building permits to DMV lines, we're cutting red tape, discarding redundant or pointless administrative rules, making time in the process as important to government as it is to the individual, and most importantly, lowering the cost of government. All for one simple reason: to free up resources for education and other vital government services. The second way I've been growing Oregon's economic pie is by investing in public works projects. I admit roads, bridges, and sewer systems are not a sexy item. And few, if any, voters think I'm punching my ballot for this guy Kulongoski or whatever his name is because I like the new curbs on my street. But the fact remains, when we invest in public infrastructure, three very good things happen. One, we improve our public infrastructure to make it attractive for businesses to locate here or stay here. Two, we improve our economy. And three, we provide living wage jobs. That's the theory, and over the last 3 years, I've spent a lot of time proving the theory works. In 2003, we passed a $2.5 billion transportation package to repair Oregon's roads and bridges. This is the largest public works project in the state since we built Oregon's share of the interstate I-5 system. It will create or sustain almost 9,000 jobs. This year, we passed Connect Oregon, which is an additional $100 million investment in our rail, port, and aviation infrastructure. Also this year, we passed bills that will lead to a $500 million investment in new capital construction on our community college and university campuses. All of this is in addition to the funding Oregon will receive from the Federal Highway Reauthorization Fund. Add it all up, and by the end of this decade, Oregon will invest over $5 billion in infrastructure improvements and create many thousands of living wage jobs that will, as I've said at the beginning, give families the ability to educate their children, buy health insurance, and put something away for a rainy day or retirement. Rebuilding Oregon's infrastructure is literally the foundation on which 3 years of economic, social, and educational progress has been made. Just let me give you a few examples. Since I talked to you almost 3 years ago, we've increased our investment in Head Start. Today, we serve 60% of 4-year-olds. We raised funding for K-12 education by 8% in this biennium. And let me speak for a moment about how we're changing the debate about higher education. Although Oregon has a growing population, attendance at our post-secondary institution is actually declining. This is a self-inflicted wound that not only hurts our economy, but destroys the hope and opportunity of our young citizens. Declining enrollment is a direct result of the large tuition increases we've seen over the last few years. So the problem isn't that our students aren't smart enough. The problem is that they're being priced out of the educational marketplace. To get a handle on this crisis this year, we capped tuition increases at 3%. Just as important, I'm going to say this again, just as important, every graduate from an Oregon high school who qualifies on the basis of need and wants to go to an Oregon community college or university will now get financial aid from the state. And starting next year, this help will be extended to all eligible part-time students. Now there's more. We're not just talking about cleaning up the Willamette River. We are cleaning up the Willamette River. I've gone to battle with the federal government over protecting salmon and keeping the 2001 roadless rule. And I'll do the same for tailpipe emissions and greenhouse gas if I believe it is in Oregon's best interest to do so. Global warming is real, and it is both a moral and a legal responsibility for elected leaders across this country to lead our citizens into a better understanding of the impact of global warming on their lives and on our futures. The best news for Oregon is our rebounding economy and rapid job growth. Our unemployment rate is 6.1%, the lowest it has been since 2001. Today, Oregon has the 6th fastest growing economy in the country. In the relatively short time since I first addressed the City Club as governor, Oregon's non-farm payroll has increased by 81,000 jobs. This sharp upturn in Oregon's employment picture has not been confined to the Portland metropolitan area. Almost every region of the state has shown job growth between 2003 and 2005. If you look at job growth by sector, there has been dramatic improvement in construction, which is up almost 20%. Business services, health services, and the hospitality industry have all increased by at least 7%. I will admit that manufacturing is still a challenge, reflecting the slow recovery of the high-tech sector of our economy. But behind these numbers are the everyday lives of Oregonians who now have the promise of economic opportunity because dozens of companies are moving to Oregon, are deciding to stay and expand in Oregon. Google, which is building a new facility in Hood River, is only the most recent example of a major company with proven growth potential discovering the unique potential of Oregon. Amy's Kitchen, Lowe's, Freightliner, Intel, Sun Microsystems, Wachovia, Royal Caribbean Cruise Line, and many other businesses have put thousands of Oregonians on the payroll in the last 3 years. As I've already suggested, a job is not the solution to every problem, but a job does bring every problem closer to a solution. That's why I created the Employer Workforce Training Fund in 2003. Since then, 11,000 current workers have been trained or are being trained for Oregon jobs. More jobs and better paying jobs are also why I have stood firm against any assault on the Oregon's minimum wage. More jobs. More jobs and better jobs are why I will travel anywhere in this world to sell Oregon, as I did last week when I attended the Coronet Global Summit, where their membership actually has access to $1.2 trillion in real estate assets. In Hollywood, you only get about 30 seconds to make a pitch. When I pitch Oregon to company executives, this is what I say: Oregon is open for business. Companies already in Oregon are confident enough in our future that they are investing billions in new facilities. We have industrial land zoned ready for development. One of the great but often ignored truths about Oregon is our favorable business climate. National survey after national survey says we have one of the best. And most important, there is consensus in Oregon, from the governor to the state's business leadership to members of the City Club of Portland, that we must invest in education. Do you want to know the first thing executives ask me about when they're considering a move to Oregon? They don't ask me about taxes. They don't ask about regulatory burdens. They say, "Governor, how good is your workforce? What skills do they have? Will they be competitive in the 21st century?" These are people who pay attention to the bottom line. They know that they cannot compete in the global marketplace unless they're able to hire highly skilled workers. And it doesn't matter whether the sign says "Help Wanted Electrician" or "Help Wanted Electrical Engineer." The same fundamental rule applies. Businesses want the best, and if they can't find the best in Oregon, they'll go someplace else. I have a very deep and personal understanding of the importance of education. The three biggest influences on my life were the nuns who raised me, the United States Marine Corps, who gave me a sense of discipline and a love of this country, and the GI Bill, which allowed me to continue my education. Growing up, I used to work in a steel mill. It was a tough job, but I actually enjoyed it. It was an honorable work. It was the kind of work that puts food on the table for thousands of Oregon families. The truth is, we do a great disservice to young people by giving them the message that they will only have value if they have a 4-year college degree. That's not true, and you and I both know that. We can and have all the engineers and architects in the world to design whatever we want, but without skilled people to pick up the tools to build the roads and buildings that these people design, it doesn't matter. We will lose. On the other hand, no Oregonian should be held back from achieving his or her full potential. I certainly wanted to achieve mine. Yes, believing in yourself is important. Being helpful and optimistic, which I've always been, is important too. But so is a helping hand. The GI Bill was my helping hand, and without it, I wouldn't have made it through college and law school. And without college and law school, I wouldn't have made it to this podium. There is not a city or town in this state where you won't find young Oregonians in pretty much the same situation I was in, and probably most of you were in at one time too. They have talent, they have drive, they have a passion for Oregon, and they have the right to expect that those of us who benefit from the post-World War II consensus that higher education should be an opportunity for the many, not a privilege of the few, will pass on the same benefit to them. I mentioned my vision for building an Oregon enterprise in Oregon. Let me read to you something Bill Gates said in describing Oregon's and America's high schools. He called them obsolete and added, "By obsolete, I mean that our schools, even when they are working exactly as designed, cannot teach our kids what they need to know." I was in the room when Bill Gates made this statement. He was trying to tell us that there is more to education reform than simply increasing the number of credits to graduate. It is what we teach them to earn those credits that's important. In short, is the subject matter relevant to today's world? I think we should listen to what Bill Gates has to say. He runs a company that provides thousands of good-paying jobs for people with the right skills. In my mind, here's the choice we face. We can place a new add a new coat of paint to a flawed education system, or we can follow the advice of one of America's leading industrialists and change the system. I want you to know, and I want every citizen of Oregon to know, that when it comes to education in Oregon, I'm only about one thing: change that will give our children the educational and economic opportunities they need to achieve their dreams. But it won't happen unless we also change from an education system where K through 12 community colleges and universities each go their own way, competing for the limited resources that we have, protecting their turf, and selling short the long-term needs of both students and the Oregon economy. So if you're happy with the status quo, I'm sure my wife and I can find you some paint in the basement of Mahonia Hall. But if you believe we can do better, if you believe we must do better, if you believe that ignoring the need for stable funding and efficient management of our schools does a terrible disservice to this state's children, then I invite you to embrace the future that I envision for education in Oregon. That future is an education enterprise, and it comes with two promises for children's parents and the educational employees. The first promise is to increase opportunity for every Oregonian by creating one coordinated and seamless system for pre-K through 20 education. The second promise is a guaranteed floor for funding the entire education enterprise. That means Oregon pre-K, Head Start, through graduate school and workforce training. Let me start with promise number one. My bottom line is education must not be a zero-sum game where one part of our education system wins at the expense of the others. Instead, I intend to raise the bar for the entire system. Although there hasn't been a lot written about in the press about this, we're already making significant progress toward managing education as one enterprise. We're finding new ways for our educational service districts to provide core services to students in local districts, while at the same time streamlining central office business functions. We're setting up an integrated data transfer system for K through 20 so that student transcripts will now be easily available through one electronic database available to high schools, community colleges, and the Oregon University system. The joint K through 12, the 14 and higher education boards are meeting on a regular basis, fostering cooperation and hard work between the two sides instead of competition. Many high school juniors and seniors are simultaneously today enrolled in an Oregon community college while they complete their high school graduation requirements. We're actively expanding this program to make sure that it is available to high school students across Oregon. Similarly, any student attending an Oregon community college that has a dual enrollment agreement with a four-year institution is entitled to earn credits at both of those universities and colleges and have those credits recognized as valid by any other community college or university they attend in this state. Finally, for students attending a community college that does not have a dual enrollment agreement, there are general education classes totaling 45 credits that can be taken at any community college and transferred to any institution in the Oregon University system. We are creating a seamless system of education in our high schools, community colleges, and four-year institutions. So my message is, we're heading in the right direction, but there are more actions that need to be taken before Oregon's children have the education enterprise they're entitled to for the prosperous future they deserve. Our 198 school districts should not be, and I repeat that, should not be negotiating separate health insurance plans, but should be part of a statewide insurance pool to reduce health care costs to our local schools. This year, for the second time, the legislature failed in its responsibility to set up one health insurance program for all school employees across the system. I promise you this issue is not going away. I'm going to keep pushing until the legislature stops listening to a handful of lobbyists and starts listening to the voices of parents and students who want responsible cost savings in our schools wherever possible and want those savings put back into the classroom. A second and even more important step we have to take is to build an education enterprise that is stable, predictable, and adequate in its funding for all parts of our education system. I think all of you will agree with this. We all tend to view education from our own mind's eye, our own experience. But believe me, a 5-year-old entering school today is coming from a very different world that you and I came from. And the job his or her teachers are being asked to perform at all grade levels is a very different job than our teachers were asked to perform. Many of these children are entering school with a lifetime of experience most of us have never had. I'm talking about drugs and alcohol, divorce, domestic abuse, no books in the home, and a media-dominated culture that promotes consumption and celebrates sex and violence. That's what's going on outside the classroom. Inside the classroom, the changes have been equally dramatic. A large influx of children without health insurance, without proper nutrition, and for whom English is a second language. Government has a moral and legal responsibility to stand up for these at-risk children. We cannot throw up our hands and say the problem is too difficult or the cost is too great. And that's why in 2003, I announced my Children's Charter for Oregon, which focuses on prevention, childcare, school readiness, keeping children safe, and moving toward the day when every child in Oregon has access to health care. Today, I can report that SMART, a reading program from kindergarten through third grade, is reaching many more children because I am the first governor to support it with public funding. The number of counties with school-based health clinics has increased from 14 to 19. We're taking steps to make sure that every child that is eligible for the Children's Health Insurance Program gets enrolled. And through better administration and higher reimbursements, we're providing more disadvantaged kids a nutritious lunch. But the fact remains, the economic, social, and health-related problems faced by at-risk children have not gone away and are rarely left outside the schoolhouse door. Instead, they come into the classroom and are dumped into the laps of teachers, teacher aides, and school administrators. To compound these challenges faced by educators, we now provide full educational opportunities to all children. This is sometimes called mainstreaming. I was in the forefront of opening the schoolhouse door for special needs children as far back as the mid-1970s. But if you graduated from high school before 1975, mainstreaming was not part of your school experience. Today, special needs children learn right alongside other children. This is as it should be. But we cannot ignore the strain that providing full educational opportunities to all children, as well as the social and cultural changes I mentioned, has put on Oregon's hardworking teachers. They deserve our profound thanks and appreciation, but they also deserve the resources they need to perform the critically difficult responsibilities we've asked them to assume. If we want our schools to not only teach the 3 R's, but to be the place where special needs children are taught, primary health care is provided, and the social problems that often accompany poverty and abuse are dealt with, that is a choice we make. But we cannot make that choice and then say, we can do this cheaply. Which brings me to promise number 2, a guaranteed minimum level of funding for all elements of the education enterprise. Historically, every biennium, the boards, staff, and stakeholders of each part of our educational system fight to get a larger share of the budget at the expense of the other parts of the system. These budget battles have had serious negative consequences. The most serious is the 2-decade-long disinvestment in higher education. As governor, I've said enough is enough. We must have stable, predictable, and adequate funding for all elements of our educational system. This is the only way that people we count on to give our children the skills they need to succeed will be able to do long-term planning instead of short-term crisis management. Here's what I am proposing. All parts of the education enterprise will be guaranteed a 10% increase in funding each biennium. That means, under my plan, in the 07-09 biennium, the entire enterprise will receive a minimum, let me say that again, a minimum of 10% more than was legislatively appropriated this year. As an example, that means the budget for K through 12, which this biennium is $5,318 million, will increase at a minimum to $5,850 million in the next biennium. That will be a $1 billion increase from 03-05 to 07-09. I will also propose that 61% of the general fund be dedicated to the education enterprise each biennium. In addition to earmarking 61% of the general fund and guaranteeing a minimum growth rate of 10%, I will make sure that education in Oregon has a meaningful stability fund. And by meaningful, I promise you this, we will not let our children fall through the trapdoor like they did from 01 to 03. I started my remarks talking about the economy and employment and moved on to education. Now, since Portland is referred to as Bridgetown, let me grab an easy metaphor and say a few words about the bridge that links my two principal topics. That link is workforce training. We've already invested millions of dollars in workforce training grants. We're working to better identify the training needs of not just local, but regional economies, especially the Portland metropolitan area. We're helping to fund the Portland Workforce Alliance, which connects businesses with schools to better prepare students for today's jobs. We're expanding what we call career pathways in our community colleges to give more focused training opportunities to adult workers to get them the training they need for the jobs they want in a shorter period of time. And we're providing more technical and professional training in high school, using industry standards as the benchmark for determining what a student needs to know. But more important than what I'm doing about workforce is why I'm doing it. The state and nation already has too many divides: urban and rural, red and blue, rich and poor, pro-globalization and anti-globalization. We also face a digital divide. And for me personally, the most dangerous divide of all is the skills divide. I want to heal all of these divides. That's who I am, and that's who I've always been. That's why on the first day of this year's session, I said both sides should pledge to put conciliation ahead of confrontation. That's why I've spent much of my time as governor visiting rural Oregon, so those communities know that they're not just part of our heritage, they're part of our economic future. That's why for more than 30 years, I worked to build a just and diverse Oregon, which means creating political, social, and economic opportunity for all of our citizens. And that's why I've made the case that free trade must be fair trade, but there is no way to put the globalization genie back in the bottle. How do we make sure that every Oregonian is a winner in the international marketplace? First, by introducing the use of technology in all sectors of our economy, and second, by closing the skills divide. I repeat to you, I refuse to govern this state as if it were an overcrowded lifeboat where we save some by jettisoning others. I want Oregon to be a place where children from low-income families have the same health care and same school readiness skills as children from middle-class families, where all high school graduates have achieved real competency in math and reading, so no matter what they do next, they're prepared. We're an education system that trains PhDs to design engineering marvels, also trains technicians to build them. Where skills acquired long ago are not retired, but are brought up to date. In other words, I want Oregon to be a place where hope is never out of sight, and opportunity is never out of reach. Thank you all very much.
I'll now open the floor for questions. Questions are a privilege for City Club members only. Our first question will be asked by our board host, Jake Okenberg. Jake is a member of our Board of Governors and is lead singer and pianist for this band, the Retrofits. Jake chairs our membership committee and is doing a great job at that, by the way. Thank you, Jake.
Governor, thank you for your words today and your focus on education and the economy. I think everyone here shares that. Those are two key concepts and two key issues that have been important to business people, politicians, educators, people from all across Oregon for years. What specifics, especially in light of the political environment that we have today, one in which people on seemingly straightforward items like creating a rainy day fund can absolutely compete when it comes to the legislative process, what specifics, if you were before us 1 year from now and 2 years from now, just 1, 2, or 3 things could we actually see in terms of your education vision get done? What things could we expect to see out of your administration?
Thank you. Well, the first thing is what I said to you. There will be a budget presented to the legislature, and I believe the legislature is committed to invest in it. Is the way what I just said is that we will put 61% of the general fund into the education enterprise. We are going to provide a more stable, predictable, reliable funding source for all elements of the enterprise. So that's going to be the first thing. The second is you are going to see me continue to improve on the Oregon economy. I cannot tell you how committed I am to my belief that, in fact, if I can provide more living wage jobs for the people in this state, we are going to have the resources we need to be able to provide the needs for education and for the other vital services that the public wants and needs. So we are going to make the financial commitment to education.
Governor, I've missed you. Are you a member of City Club, by the way?
I don't think so.
Because we have a membership table right over here.
I just looked down to my wife and said, am I a member of City Club?
Because you know we'd love to have you. Compared to the last budget, Governor, total state spending on K-12 education went up $200 million, but the amount getting into the classroom went down $300 million. And the difference, $500 million, represents the increase in overhead costs. It is a structural problem. This monster is eating the heart out of classroom funding. How are you going to fix this structural problem?
Well, first of all, I've already said 2 things that in my remarks to you. One is our efforts with the educational service districts to actually provide a more centralized function for central office business matters. There are a number of school districts. I was just over in Bend because that's education service district is one of those in the pilot program. We're going to expand this. More and more school districts around Oregon are actually utilizing their ESDs to actually perform this type of a function like payroll, like data processing and things like that instead of replicating it over a number of districts. In fact, if you want to see a great model of it, the I Own School District, which became a school district I think in 2003, actually has started contracting out just about all the central office services to the ESD, and they pay a fee for it, but they do not have to pay that overhead cost themselves. Secondly is the statement I'm telling you about the insurance, the medical cost. It's not just with education, because what we should do is be looking at this for all public employees to be in one large health pool so that, in fact, the state can better leverage to get better rates to be able to hold down the cost of health care. The other issues are the issues around PERS, which we went after, and I want everybody here to understand this because there's so much misinformation about it. There is only one piece of the reform that the court actually said we could not do. And I want you to know it was at my insistence that we put in trying to amortize the 8% assumed rate over the life of the retiree. The court said we could not do that, and they had to calculate it at 8% per year. The only other thing the court objected to was an idea when I saw that Judge Lipscomb's opinion in 1999 on the miscrediting of the accounts, that I knew that when I read his opinion that in fact there would have to be a payback. And what I said was, let's not take it out of the existing retirement checks, let's take it out of the cost of living in the future. I was sued over that, and the court said I couldn't do it, and now we're in a situation where PERS is now having to go back and do what I was hoping they did not have to do. But the fact is the reforms are in place, they're working, and the reality is that by the end of this decade, the PERS system that was in existence before 2003 will not look anything like the system that is in effect now. We are now having all new hires coming into the system or in a 401k system. And so we're doing it a little bit differently. So we're cutting down the overhead cost on those pieces. Ultimately, I think that the issue will come down that when we get cost saving in the system, how can we guarantee that it will go into the classroom? Because that's what I hear from the parents all the time. Yes, Governor, we understand what you're trying to do, but we want the guarantee that it comes back to the classroom. And that's the effort that we all have to make together to make sure that that's where the money goes.
Cy Cornbrook, City Club member. I'm on the board of the Multnomah Education Service District, and we have an efficiency in scale. It means that we handle the most serious cases, and each district doesn't have to have a bureaucracy for that type of thing. Yet, we get less money this year for those kids that are the most serious problems. We've been talking about this. There's a lot of misinformation about what the ESDs do, and they're an easy target. And I'd like what you have to say on that.
Well, Si, I served on the education, the commission that put the education reform plan together. And I'm going to tell you, I remember sitting, and I don't know if he's here, but Duncan Weiss chaired the committee, and I realized that, and I've been in this business for a long time, the one piece that was the great mystery to everybody was the ESD. No one could figure out what they did because none of them did it the same, each with each other. They each did it differently. And so my answer to you is, it still remains a confusion in the system. I think that we have to get a better understanding of it, which is why I pushed this pilot program through the legislature to get an opportunity to look at the ESDs to see if there is some uniformity where they could be a more cost-effective partner with the local school districts. So that's what we're trying to do. But if you're asking me whether I know everything about ESDs because of the 20 of them, I believe, in the state, that you all do it differently.
Governor.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm Gilly Burlingham. Your speech made me weak at the knees. I am not used to hearing a governor speak with such common sense and such wisdom. I moved here recently from New York State.
If you keep talking to me, I'm going to actually change my mind about the Yankees, but go ahead.
Well, I'm originally from Chicago. And I actually,
Brown.
yeah, I actually lived in a farm in Western New York, and I pay a hefty school tax there. In fact, it went up $1,000 just this last year. I don't begrudge a penny of it. Our system there, of course, is by school district. I own property here. I don't begrudge a penny of what I pay. But first I want to say I have to disagree with you about something. I think infrastructure is very sexy. And not only that, we can't outsource those jobs, right? They all have to stay right here. Because New York State, some years ago, had the collapse of a bridge and people died. Our country has neglected infrastructure so badly And I do really, my sister happens to be an engineer who does sewage, so I've been following some of these issues for a long time. Anyway, I have a puzzlement. For years I've been wondering why the 50 governors didn't take the metaphorical form of a battering ram and charge the White House and demand that our federal government change its priorities. The obscene amounts that have gone to so-called Homeland Security recently, and our killing budget, our war budget. It is so unnecessary. The amount of money spent for our military machine, the wonderful military-industrial complex. I think this would actually be a politically astute moment, considering what's going on in D.C., for the governors to go and demand that the spending should be changed entirely to what really would make us a safe nation. And by the way, 9/11 was just blowback for what we've been doing since the Second World War. Education should be the first priority of this country. And all the other social safety net should come after that. And by the way, even though I came out here as a Green Party member, I'm now a Democrat. Thank you for your answer.
Yes.
David Poole, City Club member. Governor, you mentioned Google and their new plant that's going on up at the Dells, I believe it is. On Tuesday, I was with you when Google's Chris DeBona delivered a $350,000 check to help fund education here at Portland State University and down at Oregon State University. I'm wondering what your perspective is on the open source software industry and their role in the economy here in Oregon.
Actually, I'm assuming that everybody knows that Oregon has become the center of gravity for the open source technology throughout the world. It's a little known fact that Linus Torvald is here, moved here from Norway, and resides in Beaverton. Let me just tell you this: is that I believe in two things, in technology and the market, to be able to resolve this. I don't think that it is right for the state to choose one process over the other. And I know some states are moving in that direction, but I would rather the marketplace and technology and competition actually drive this thing. And I think that that's how ultimately, when people have the ability to have more choices, I think it is best for all of us. And so my view of it is I think it's a very, very important piece of Oregon, and it will continue to be of Oregon's economy. As far as me as the governor, I actually want to encourage my managers and my employees in state government to use open source. But it's not going to be mandated by a statute. I don't think that that's the answer to this.
Governor, thank you for being here today. I'm Melody Rose, City Club member. It seems to me that any radical change in education policy would come with a commensurate level of attention to our tax policy. And I wonder if you could comment on your concerns around tax policy and what we might do with that area of reform in order to help achieve your education goals.
You know, that is probably the best question about my idea of an Oregon enterprise, because there are a couple of things that I would respond to you with. One is that we all know that what goes up comes down, and that when Oregon's economy is growing like it is now, as it did between 95 and 01, the state government does well in terms of revenue, because 70% of our income comes off of the personal income tax. And when the economy is growing and people are working and they're doing well, it's what my message was in my remarks to you, was that in fact that there will be more resources for state government. But I also know that what happened in 01 can happen again. There will be another recession sometime. And so how do we build stability into the system? That raises another issue. There are two issues fundamentally in a tax debate, and that's one is about the issue of equity, and the other is adequacy. I always believed you could address them both at the same time. I do not believe that any longer. I think the most important thing is to actually address the stability issue. And as I said in my remarks, so that we don't let children fall through the trapdoor again, like we did. The state between in 01-03 lost more of its general fund than any state in the country. And education suffered the burden as much as any program. What we need to do, though, let me suggest this. Do we need more stability in our tax system? Yes. The state has sent out over the last 30 years 20 different tax measures for a vote of the people surrounding K-12 education reform. 6 of them have been around the property tax, 5 of them have been around the income tax, 4 of them have been sales taxes. The rest have been some combination of the others. Every one of those has failed. Not by 51-49 or 52-48, where you and I can go back in and say, well, if we just change this, we can run this back out again. This has been 75-25, 80-20. To me, if we were all doctors and 20 people came in this room and got up on the stage and they all had the same affliction and we all treated them the same way and they all died, one of us would say, I think we better look at this a little differently. And I'm telling you, it isn't a question about the mechanism or what it is. We know that. How do we get the public to believe it is in their interest, their children's interest, and in the future of this state to bring more stability into the system? That's the question. And what I'm trying to tell you is if you tie education to economic growth and opportunity for people, the base of support for wanting stability grows. We haven't tied the two together before, both as a unified enterprise in the system of education and telling people how important this is. And for those of you in education, you know this better than I do. I can show you the graphs. The earning capacity of people with a college degree versus a high school degree, it's off the chart. And I'm telling you, that's the message. But we all have to come together, support the enterprise, help us grow this message of the relationship of education to the economy, to your children and my children and their children, their opportunities that they will have here in Oregon. The truth is, Oregon's niche in this global economy is to be the best educated, best trained, best skilled workforce in the country. If we do that, we're going to have the quality of life all of us want and love about our state. That's the challenge, is to get the people, the citizens, to understand we have to bring more stability to the system.
Aubrey Russell, City Club members. 61% might keep education in the life raft, but without increased revenues, aren't other programs going to have to be jettisoned? How really are we going to address the revenue issue head on? As you just outlined, it's going to depend enormously on people's understanding of their own self-interest. What if that doesn't happen? What if we have a 61% target? And our revenues don't increase?
It's the issue of stability that you're asking that I addressed, because it's the whole issue is on the economy growing, providing those jobs. The issue you ask is that if in fact that you have another recession, the first thing we're trying to do is to build a new stability fund that is going to provide the mechanism under this program. The state government, the forecast is the general fund will grow about 12% per year. What I've done is said 10, and the reason is the other 2% goes to the stability fund in 2 different pieces to be able to make sure that we make that commitment even in a bad year. So we're actually looking at it in terms of how do I continue this if in fact the economy does go down. The second issue you asked, though, is the one I think you're looking for the answer is, when are you going to have another debate about taxes? That's what you're after. And the fact is, you've got to, as I said, this isn't about whether, in fact, you can put something out there. It is getting the citizens to sit down and want to make the change. They will make the change if they understand the connection between education as an enterprise from preschool to 20 and its relationship to their economic futures. It's a self-interest argument, I admit that. And I think that that's what most people are concerned about.
Chris Solomon, City Club member. I want to carry forward these previous two questions a little bit further. You talked a bit about how favorable our business climate is, indeed that they would want to have strong schools, and yet lately we've seen our median wages go down despite the growth in jobs, and over the past couple plus decades we've seen the corporations contribute 18% to now less than 5% of the general fund. So my question to you is, if indeed corporations are pushing for a strong educational environment, is this environment that we have for corporations actually too favorable?
It's a good question, because you know what, the piece I told you about the business magazines that say that Oregon is a good place to do business? One of the reasons is that I think that we're about 38th in the nation of the 50 states on a comparative listing of tax burden at state and local taxes for its citizens, and the business side of this. And the truth of it is, before Measure 5, the equation was 60% was paid by business and 40% was paid by individuals. It is now about 61-39 in the opposite direction. The individuals are paid. It's the different. It's what happened when Measure 5 passed, when in fact the big beneficiaries were the commercial property holders. That's what happened, and I don't believe, and I don't think many people in this room believe, that's what the public was after with Measure 5. It was the residential homeowner that we were trying to address. The question you're asking in the equity argument that I made a minute ago, that is it. It is people, businesses, corporations paying their fair share. When you have a $10 minimum corporate tax, it's outrageous. At a time when, in fact, we're trying to fund the schools and we're trying to fund health care and do all these things. And we proposed it. Now, you know the debate in the legislature, it becomes a mantra about no new taxes. The fact is, we are going to address the stability issue. The equity issue is part of that debate.
Steve Novick, City Club member. Governor, first of all, sincere condolences on the St. Louis Cardinals. Second, as we speak here, the Republican governor of Colorado and that state's entire business community are trying to fight their way out from under a 1992 ballot measure known as Tabor that has gutted public education in that state. Meanwhile, the extremist national group Freedom Works has pledged to put that same measure on the ballot in Oregon next year. Looking at the 2006 election, what do you think will be the most important task for Oregonians? Re-electing Ted Kulongoski or defeating Tabor?
Steve, only you would ask me, when did I last beat my wife? I understand that. Let me answer it in two ways. First of all, I think you can do both. You can elect me and defeat Tabor. I don't think they're mutually exclusive. The second thing is that, you know, when I said to you about one of the best kept secrets is the favorable business climate in Oregon, the other is that I don't understand why there's even an argument why you need a Tabor in this state. And the reason is, first of all, we already have a spending limit. And the second is that if you look at the legislature, what I've tried to do is we have brought stability to this state budget. I don't think that there's an argument that the state government needs Tabor. I think this is a political tool to raise money and to energize somebody's base. But if it would get on the ballot, Steve, it is the big issue. Because the rest of this, if something like happened in Colorado happened here, we would be in a very, very dire situation. And look, I know Bill Owens very much, the governor of Colorado, and this guy, I used to think that Bill, if he could, there would be no taxes. We'd all be living off the land. But I'm going to tell you this, when he stands up and proposes changes to this thing, you know how dangerous it is. And it has not done Colorado well. And it's a very, very, very bad measure, and I hope they don't get it on the ballot, but it does. It's going to be at the top of the list of the things we go after.
Governor Andrea Meyer, Legislative Director for the ACLU and City Club member. In 2003, you proposed a constitutional amendment that included taxpayer monies going to private religious higher education institutions. And I'm wondering if that's still part of your plan.
Is this the asset program?
Correct. It was the constitutional amendment that you submitted and testified before in the 2003 session.
Yeah. Let me tell you what this is about. I actually believe, and of all places that I think have come up with one of the great ideas, is anybody here from Georgia? The Georgia, yeah, there she is, my staff member, and that's how I got. The Hope Scholarship Program in Georgia is something that I've always been enamored with, and I wanted to bring it to Oregon. And I wanted to provide the opportunity and see if we could put together an endowment that would actually provide tuition scholarships for every student in this state who graduated from high school, from a public, parochial, homeschooled, high school, to get free tuition to any public or private university in this state. And what was just asked is the argument is, well, that's using tax dollars for public institutions. And the truth of it is we already do it. Because what I told you about, that we have now increased the Opportunity Grant Program for college students and are going to apply it to part-time students next year, that program is available to the student, and they can place it in any public or private university they want to. They want to go to the University of Portland, they can. They want to go to Willamette, they can. They want to go to George Fox, they can. You want to know why? I actually argued this debate. Do you know, how many of you know that half of the new teaching corps that shows up in our schools every year are the product of the private universities here in Oregon? They are supplying half of the teaching power for Oregon. We have to invest in them. They need to be part of this discussion, because you know, when I talk to you about what Bill Gates said, do you know where this debate all starts? It starts in the schools of education. That's where we have to start this effort on what we teach. And I believe the private universities in this state and colleges are as much a part of our educational system as the public side. So I'm not hesitant about telling you that if I had my way, my scholarship program for every student in the state would be available to any student who would take it any place they wanted to.
I'm Diane Circle, City Club member and Executive Director of the Portland Youth Philharmonic. When we talk about our economy and our creative future in this state, we know that music education and arts education is central to student achievement. And I'm wondering, in your vision for the state and the state's education policies, what role the arts and arts education play in that?
Actually, the arts have been a major effort on my administration, from movies I've gone down to Los Angeles, because I don't know how many of you know, but the film industry doesn't film in Los Angeles anymore. Most of them are being filmed in Canada, and what we tried to do was to do something that would get them to stop here. We have had 2 programs over 2 sessions that the legislature have passed that have been very conducive to the film industry, which I think is going to help Oregon. It's not only good for the arts, it's great for the economy, because they bring a lot of money into this economy. The second is what I've done in whether it's the Cultural Trust or what's with the Arts Commission, which I've tried to expand and grow. It is the fact is that I am one to believe that the arts are furniture for the mind. I think we become better people, and Oregon becomes a better place when we invest in them, and we have done that. And that is part of my agenda, not just for education, but it's really a great piece for helping people grow this economy. Thank you all very, very much.
Governor Kulongoski, thank you for joining us at City Club, and we're adjourned.